Today's episode of The Crucible is probably going to be one of my favorites because I'm talking to one of my favorite people, Molly Watson, who we are going to hear from today. I'll give you a little snippet about her remarkable career, and then we're going to kind of get into her crucible moment or how she even thinks about failure in general. So let me give you a little bit of background on Molly. She's a seasoned leader in marketing communications with a number of years of experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. She's currently serving as the Chief Marketing Officer at Indivets. She's been instrumental in that company's rapid growth, earning accolades such as Certified Great Place to Work and repeated recognition for Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies list. Before Indivets, Molly founded the consultancy Evolution Engine, and she held leadership roles at many a company, including Tierney Communications and Young and Rubicam, where she worked on top brands like AT&T and Kraft Foods. Her achievements have earned her several awards, including Philadelphia Business Journal's Women of Distinction, Adweek, She Runs It's Working Mother of the Year. Congratulations for that one. I was there for that.
Yeah.
And the Mission in Action Award from the Women's Resource Center. Molly's also deeply committed to philanthropy, serving on boards including Fred's Footsteps, the People's Emergency Center of Philadelphia, and the Dean's Advisory Board of the Media School at Indiana University. She currently serves as clerk of Delaware Valley Friends School's Board of Trustees, and in her spare time she enjoys endurance sports, hiking, let's talk about that, and spending time with family. Molly, thank you so much for coming to The Crucible.
It is my pleasure always, Jeff.
Absolutely. I mean, if people know me and you've heard my story, you'll have inevitably heard me mention Molly once or twice, maybe by name, maybe not. She's too humble to accept that, but it is what it is.
No, well, I still remember when you're like this skinny kid right out of college, running around trying to get stuff done, and doing it. So
this is true. I'm not as skinny anymore, but this show is pretty simple. It's I want folks who have been successful in their career, in their personal life, or what have you, to come on. And really what happens when we have those successes is people put us on a pedestal and think of us, or they think of successful people as something more than regular average person who hasn't gone through trials and tribulations. And so that's why we created The Crucible, to give a platform to leaders like yourself and others to say, hey, yes, you might see all the success and all the glitz and whatever, but there are trials and tribulations and things that I went through that made me stronger, that I've taken, that have become lessons and things I've leaned on to get to this point. And so with that said, why don't you tell us a little bit about, I love how you think of failure. So I'd love we were talking earlier and you mentioned how you think of failure. I'd love you to kind of explain that.
Well, it's, when we first started talking about doing this podcast, and you said we're going to explore failure and how it makes you a better person. I mean, and that's probably been 3 or 4 weeks, and I've been banging my head thinking about failure. And, I very humbly say I don't think that I've had any, because failure feels so permanent. Now, I have screwed up a ton, right? I've messed up. I've done all types of things that maybe feel like a short-term failure, but like this long-term hindsight piece, it's different to me. And I got tons of, I could say, oh, well, I didn't study for my ACT, or I didn't pursue my career as an actress, or my big one was I got into this prestigious summer stock program and I turned it down to be with a guy who dumped me 3 weeks later. Or I stayed in one job too long, right? So those things could be, but they start to feel a little bit more like regrets over time versus like failing. Yeah. And so when I was really trying to think about prepping for our chat, I found a really cool quote that I thought I would share with you.
Yeah, please.
That sort of is a great lead into the way that, I think about failure and maybe what we can talk about today. So it said, more people fail not because they lack knowledge or talent, but because they just quit. It's important to remember 2 words, persistence and resistance. Persist in what must be done and resist what ought not to be done. So for me, in another way, persistence is about resilience and stamina, like not quitting.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think a trendy term for both of those things together is grit. Yeah. And I think I was born with some grit, and then I've honed it through what my family refers to as the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Like just stuff that pummels you throughout life, right? That helps you learn how to deal with failure in the moment, right? And be resilient, and then, you know, take it forward.
No, I love that, because you're right. Failure, you know, to your point, has a feeling of finality, and you're right. The reason it feels final is because those who in that moment feel like they failed, if you quit, it was final.
Yeah.
Right? Versus if you kind of carry on. That's a great quote. So you talk about honing this kind of, you know, this skill. Like tell us a little bit about that. Like how have you?
So, you know, again, I've had a long and really fun and wonderful and challenging and painful career, but there are really like two moments when I think about it in my life that changed me forever in terms of my resilience and my grit. One was the death of my mom a month after I graduated from college. I was 21, and she was my person, and my dad was like fine, but not, you know, into that. And the second was becoming a mom, and I think, you know, that two of my kids have some pretty significant challenges. So, you know, those life moments give you perspective that help you keep the business moments, you know, for lack of redundancy, in perspective again, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't know, I've always said, you don't know what you're capable of until you're in the middle of doing it, right? Or your back's against the wall and you have one choice, give up or take a step.
Yeah.
So there have been multiple crossroads in my life where like I might have laid in bed for like a few hours and thought about giving up. And then I was like, all right, that's really not going to work for me. So I'm going to go out and step in the next big pile of stuff to figure out what I'm going to do.
No, I love that. That, man. Well, it's interesting too, because you talked about, you know, perspective. And I think that is probably a recurring theme that we see with folks who have achieved and are now in a position to go, oh, when I look back, like, you know, this is where it changed. I think death and then to your life are, you know, like those are two perspective changing things. We had a guest who spoke about it was the birth of his child that changed the way he looked at himself, right? And so a lot of us, we pour ourselves into work.
Yeah.
And while you don't have other lives to be responsible for, that could be okay for a moment.
Yeah.
But when you become that person who's responsible for other lives, whether it be an elderly.
Well, it's interesting because for me, when the personal challenges became so big, work became respite and something that I could control.
Yeah.
Some people who have worked with me may say I might try to control too much. I will tell you that the only thought that runs through my head sometimes about being a failure is, as a mom, you know, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
Because kids, man, I'm not doing that again in my next life, I'm just saying. But because you have to learn to just let them make their mistakes, or you understand that you've done all you can do.
Yeah. And
so you can transcend that over to professional workplace situations to understand when it's okay to be like, you know, I did everything I could, and that's different than quitting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and you're absolutely right. I think as a parent, it's one of the toughest things, because other parents who've gone through it already will tell you like, hey, sometimes you got to let them fail, and you're like, yeah, but I can't. I see it coming, or and I want to step in and I want to be there to catch, but really, if you catch them, they never get an opportunity to rebound, right? And so you have to be, you know, now sometimes, I said this to a friend of mine the other day, I said, you can let your son jump off the table now, or stop him and keep him from jumping off the table, and then see him jump off a roof later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, so every once in a while, you got to let him jump off the table because it's lower. This is safe. That's tragic.
Yeah.
And so I was explaining to him that, and I was like, we were having a conversation about, falls and then getting back up. And so, that definitely resonates with me. Let me ask you this: how did that, how did those things you were going through, the death of your mother, having having your children and them having significant issues, how did that impact you from a leadership perspective, if you don't mind my asking? And because work was your respite, but then, and you said some people thought you were control things, but I'm curious, like, how did it impact your?
So it, other than being able to have the perspective of life, we say often cliches like, well, it's not life or death, but my daughter Maggie, the first 2 years of her life were, a life or death. So it sort of really had that touchstone. And everyone calls, it's in vogue now to say you're a vulnerable leader.
Yeah.
I've always sort of been that way, but once I was struggling to meet my children's needs and work, there was no way that I could come to work and not tell my staff when I was having a bad day and why.
Yeah.
And I have always believed in, being authentic and appropriate. One of my kids a couple years ago had some problems with drugs and was in rehab, and I had to say to my staff one day, guys, I'm not going to be here on Monday. I could have stopped it, and I said, and I told them what was going on. They all had like their eyes wide open, but so there's this authenticity and vulnerability that I bring naturally.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to cultivate it. I think a lot of leaders have to cultivate it.
Yeah.
But what that does is it creates a safe place for people, hopefully, to be themselves, share, and take risks.
Yeah.
This is a risk, if you're going to tell somebody, if something's not going right. And I think the other thing that has really huge is I learned to ask for help. And, super achievers, I would say like us, like kicking butt, taking names, making it look easy. Asking for help is also something that feels like failure.
Yeah.
And, but when you say to your team, I got nothing. What do you guys got? Or like, I just can't do this. Can you go, how about you tackle this? And, then there's this huge open road for them to try, and it's massive relief for you.
Yeah.
So, those are the vulnerability and the asking for help and just trying to keep the perspective, all layered in with a ton of a sense of humor. I use that a lot. So.
Well, what's interesting is you're right. It's kind of in vogue now for leaders to be vulnerable, but what I find about your particular vulnerability and the way you lead and have led, most people, when they come into their career, their first one or two leaders are going to significantly impact how they lead. Right? Either you're going to have a good leader and you're going to model yourself after them, or you're going to have a bad leader and model yourself after them. And so I think, what you'll probably find is like when you've led with some level of vulnerability, like you'll see it's almost like a DNA chain, right? Like, yeah. And so you'll see those pieces in people who have been impacted in a positive way from that leadership. And so I think that's why now it's so necessary, for people to authentically, I think that was the right word, authentically express that vulnerability. Not like, when you're trying to, our people know it.
Yeah.
Like,
but if you hide it in such a way that makes you like faceless,
yeah.
When you asking people to do really hard stuff or climb a big ass mountain with you, if they don't understand that it's just as hard on you as it is on them, they're not going to be motivated to do it.
That's true.
And, it's fascinating because you said your first or second boss, I spent the first about 10 years on Madison Avenue, New York, a big agency. There's only one boss I had that I could say I felt was like someone I would emulate. I had a lot of those that were sort of absentee.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was this, like I call it a flashbulb moment. One night I had been in the business, like, I don't know, 2.5 years, and I had to do this project. And my boss stopped by to say he was leaving. And I was like, but I got to do this thing. And he's so calm. He's like, you'll figure it out, Margaret. He used my real name, which nobody
name.
does, right? And he left, and I was like, all righty then. And that was a right thing. It's like letting your kid jump off the table.
Yeah.
Because I figured it out, right?
Yeah.
So it was fascinating because it was less about him like sort of coddling and more about him teaching me to trust my instincts.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I think I've probably failed at, is trusting my instincts.
You mean you failed to trust them, or you trusted them and they?
Probably both.
Okay, so here's a perspective I'll give you.
Yeah.
I think failing to trust them, that's one thing, right? It means like I thought I should do that and I didn't. But when you trust them and the things don't go the way you thought, it's not a loss, right? That's a lesson.
It's a total lesson. Yeah.
So you're like, okay, I did that, it didn't work, but what did I get from it? So, you know, I don't think that one, I wouldn't qualify that as a.
Yeah, I guess you're right. That's true.
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm being honest, the time that the side where you trust and you do whatever, the reverse. You just said you.
So sometimes you have an instinct, you don't trust
Right.
it, so you don't follow it.
Okay, yeah, that mostly my professional life, right? The other one, a lot of bad relationships. So, just saying, okay? Those instincts were not good.
Well, you know, at least you learned. Like, I don't like that.
Right.
That was
took me about 40 years, but okay.
It might take you some time. That's
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
As long as you get the lesson eventually.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
keep,
that's the thing
know.
too. I'm still learning.
We all. So, yeah. So let me ask this. What would you say to someone? I mean, that was actually part of it, but like, if I had to ask you for one gem that our audience should take home about crucible moments, how they approach them, how they rebound from them, like what would be something you would want the audience to walk away from?
So here's what I've learned, is you have to learn when it's okay to step away. Sometimes that means go take a walk, right? Give it some time to ruminate. That means, put it down and move away from something that is, whatever the path is, hasn't been working. And it could be like a new business pitch or a strategy or a staff member that you're cultivating, right? So know, and that's not failing and that's not quitting. Know when to step aside, which is also different, like passing the baton. And I got much better at that in the second half of my career. Maybe there was some ego in, but also just like constantly wanting to make things happen and move it forward. But stepping aside is sometimes takes way more strength, right?
Yeah.
Than stepping forward. And the last one is like, just ask for some help.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of those are absolutely. I mean, the stepping aside thing, anytime you shift into a leadership role, that's the hardest part, right? Because a lot of times you get into a leadership role because you're getting rewarded for being a good doer.
Yeah.
And now you got to be not a good doer, a good coach and having other people learn how to do so you can do something different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggle with that.
I think that the other thing that is understanding that, and this is where it's either stepping aside or stepping away, two different things, but is knowing when you've done all you can, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's one that comes with experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, if you're type A, it's never an easy thing. You can be, your back could be against the wall sometimes when you do it. But it's just like anything. It's like muscle memory. The more you sort of put your foot out on that ice, like, okay, I can. This feels okay. But I've been I've been nurturing that a long time.
Yeah.
It was not easy for me to step away, step aside, or ask for help.
Like, I love that. Like, step away, step aside, or ask for help. For those of you who find yourself in a crucible moment, I think those are very poignant words. Thank you, Molly, so much.
My pleasure.
I can't even, there's no other way to close it, but for those of you who are watching, please continue to watch. We'll have more Crucible moments with more amazing people like the wonderful Molly Watson. Thank you all. God bless.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of The Crucible with Jeff Marshall. If you would like to be a guest on the program, let's be in touch. And be sure to stay connected with us through your favorite platforms. The Crucible with Jeff Marshall is part of the A Live Podcast Network and can be found in audio-only format wherever you listen to your podcasts. Production of this project was created by Gifted Entertainment, a full-service creative video production company.